My mother waited until the whole table had food in front of them before she said it. She set down her fork, looked at me the way you look at a bill you have already decided not to pay, and told me, "Odalys, your sister deserves to enjoy her life. You work. That is what you are good for. If you do not like the arrangement, you can leave." My sister's boyfriend laughed into his napkin. My father nodded like a judge who had already read the verdict off a card. And I sat there in the house I had been paying for since I was 26. In the dining room I had furnished with my own money. And I understood that to my own family, I had stopped being a daughter years ago. I had become a bank that came to dinner. Let me take you back. Because that sentence did not come from nowhere. It came from 11 years of small permissions I gave, without ever noticing I was giving them. My name is Odalys Pemberton. I am 34 years old. I keep the books for a mid-sized commercial flooring company, the kind of place that outfits office towers and hospital wings, with the carpet nobody ever thinks about. I am the controller. That means every dollar that moves through that company moves past my eyes first. I can look at a spreadsheet the way other people look at a photograph and see the whole story in it. Who spent what, who lied about it, who thought no one would check. I am very good at my job. I have never once been good at applying that same clear sight to my own family. That is my flaw. And I want to name it early so you understand. I am not telling you a story about a perfect woman who got wronged. For most of my life, I believed that being needed was the same thing as being loved. As long as the money flowed out of my account and into theirs, I got to keep my seat at the table. I got the phone calls. I got the thank yous, thin as they were. I confused the invoice for affection. And a woman who audits multinational vendors for a living somehow never audited the one account that was bleeding her dry. Our house sits on a quiet street in a suburb where the trees are older than the houses. 2 stories, blue shutters, a porch my father used to sit on before he decided the porch was beneath him. I remember the day the mortgage cleared in my name, 7 years ago. I did not tell anyone. I drove to the county office on my lunch break, signed where they told me to sign, and drove back. The paper smelled like a copy machine, warm and chemical. I put it in a folder in my closet, and I felt something I did not have a word for. Pride, maybe. Or the quiet of finally owning the ground I stood on. I told myself I would tell my family soon. I never did. Remember that folder. It matters later. The kitchen in that house is the center of everything. My mother, Delphine, cooks the way she loves, loudly and with conditions. The whole downstairs smells of browned garlic and the particular sweetness of the plantains she fries on Sundays. She would call me at work mid-afternoon, and I could hear the oil popping in the background. And she would say, "The gutters are pulling away from the roof again." And I would say, "I will send someone." And she would hang up before saying goodbye. That was our whole relationship in one exchange. A problem, a payment, a dial tone. My sister is named Marisol. She is 3 years younger than me, and she has never once in her adult life held a job for longer than 5 months. This is not laziness the way you are picturing it. Marisol is charming in a way I have never been. She walks into a room and the room rearranges itself around her. She got that from our mother. What she got from our father was the belief that the world owed her comfort and that someone else would always arrive to provide it. For most of her adult life, that someone was me. I want you to see her before you decide how to feel about her, because she was my little sister first. When we were children, she had a fear of thunder so complete that she would crawl into my bed during storms and press her cold feet against my legs. And I would tell her the thunder was just the sky moving furniture around upstairs. She believed me until she was 12. There is a version of Marisol that still exists somewhere, the one who trusted me to explain the frightening things. I kept paying, I think, partly because I was always trying to buy my way back to that girl. My father is named Cornelius. He worked 30 years installing air conditioning units, and he has a bad back and a worse temper and a very specific theory about family. His theory is that a family is a body, and the body sends its blood to the parts that need it most. He would say this at holidays, pleased with himself. The strong carry the weak. That is not unfair. That is nature. He said it so many times I stopped hearing the second half, which was always aimed at me. I was the strong one. Marisol was the weak one, and blood only flows one direction. The first crack, the one I should have seen, came 4 years ago. Marisol wanted to open a boutique. Clothing, she said, curated, her word. She needed $40,000 to start. She came to my apartment, because I still had my own apartment then, and she sat on my couch and cried and said this was the thing that would finally make our parents proud of her. And I, who had already read enough business plans at work to know a doomed one when I saw it, wrote her the money anyway. I told myself it was an investment. I told myself she would pay it back. But underneath that, the real thing, the thing I can only see now, was this. When Marisol needed me, I mattered. I would rather be the sister with the checkbook than the sister nobody called. The boutique lasted 7 months. She never mentioned the $40,000 again, and neither did I, because to bring it up would have been to admit what I already knew. That I had not made an investment, I had paid a fee. The fee to remain necessary. By the time I moved back into the family house, 3 years ago, the arrangement had calcified into something none of us named. I paid the mortgage, though it was already mine. I paid the utilities, the property tax, my mother's medications, my father's back specialist, and a monthly allowance to Marisol, that everyone called her help getting on her feet. As though she had been on her feet at some point and merely stumbled. I moved back because my mother's blood pressure scared me, and because, if I am honest, my apartment had become very quiet and the house was at least full of noise, even if the noise was mostly demands. Here is the detail I need you to hold. Every Sunday, when my mother fried the plantains, she saved the first one for my father and the second one for Marisol. And I got mine last, whatever was left, usually the small broken pieces at the bottom of the pan. I noticed it every single week for 3 years. I never said a word. I told myself it did not mean anything. A woman who can find a $12 discrepancy in a 40-page ledger told herself the order of the plantains did not mean anything. It meant everything. It was the whole arrangement, fried and served on a chipped blue plate. The wound opened on an ordinary Tuesday. I came home from work later than usual. A vendor dispute had eaten my afternoon, and I found my mother at the kitchen table with a stack of glossy brochures. Cruise brochures. The kind with couples in white linen standing at the rail of a ship watching a sunset they paid a great deal for. She slid one across the table to me without looking up. "Your father and I are going," she said. "And Marisol, 12 days, the Mediterranean." I looked at the brochure. I looked at the price circled in my mother's handwriting. $9,400 for the 3 of them, and that was before the flights. "That is a lot of money, Mama," I said carefully, "the way you step onto ice." "It is," she agreed, "which is why it is good that you are doing so well." And she finally looked up at me, and there was no shame in her face, none, just the calm expectation of a woman requesting what she considers already hers. "You will help. You always help. You are the reliable one. The reliable one. Do you know what it does to a person to be called reliable by the people who use you? It is the word you give to an appliance. A reliable car. A reliable washing machine. It means you perform your function and you do not complain, and no one thinks about you until you break. And here is the part that opened the wound wide, the part I still turn over at night. Marisol was standing in the kitchen doorway the whole time, and behind her was a man I had not met, tall, well-dressed, watching. Her new boyfriend, Reed. She had brought him home to see the family. And the first thing he saw of me was my mother asking me to fund a vacation I was not invited to. And Marisol smiling at him as if to say, "See, I told you, she takes care of everything. I said I would think about it." My mother had already turned back to her brochures. The conversation, as far as she was concerned, was over. I went up to my room and I sat on the edge of my bed, and I did not cry, because I had run out of the kind of tears that change anything. Instead, I did the thing I do when the world stops making sense. I got out my laptop and I started building a spreadsheet. Not for work, for me, a ledger of the last 11 years. I want to tell you what I found, because it is the engine of everything that happened after. I pulled my bank records going back as far as the system would let me. I categorized every transfer, every check, every payment I had made on behalf of my family. It took me 4 nights. And when I was done, the number at the bottom of the column was so large, I had to check my own math twice, the way I would for a client. Over 11 years, Between the mortgage and the taxes and the medications and the boutique and the allowances and the 1,000 small emergencies, I had paid out just past $340,000. I sat with that number in the dark. $340,000. A down payment on a life I had never let myself have. And the strangest part, the part that tells you everything about who I was, is that my first feeling was not anger. My first feeling was fear. Because if I stopped paying, who would I be to them? If the money stopped, would the phone calls stop too? Being needed was the only proof of love I had ever been given. And I was terrified to test whether anything was underneath it. But I had the spreadsheet now. And a woman who can see the whole story in a spreadsheet cannot fully unsee it, no matter how much she wants to. That was the first cold move, though I did not know it yet. I had started keeping records. The first hot confrontation came 10 days later, and it was about the cruise. Marisol found me in the kitchen on a Sunday, oil already popping on the stove, my mother somewhere upstairs. Marisol had a way of asking for money that did not sound like asking. She would frame it as informing you of a decision that had already been made. So the cruise is booked for the 15th of next month, she said, pulling a plantain from the pan with her fingers. The second one, the good one. Mama put down the deposit. We just need the balance by the end of the month. 7,000-ish. You can do it in 2 transfers, if that is easier for your taxes or whatever. For your taxes or whatever, she did not even know what I did for a living. 11 years of my money in her life, and she thought controller was a kind of remote. I am not paying for the cruise, Marisol, I said. I had never said no to her before. Not really. The words felt strange in my mouth, like a language I had studied but never spoken aloud. She laughed. She actually laughed. A short surprise sound, because she was so certain I was joking that my refusal did not register as real. Very funny. Seriously, end of the month. I mean it. I'm not paying for a vacation I'm not going on. I'm not paying for anything else, actually. I think I'm done. That was when it stopped being funny. Her face did something I had never seen it do. A kind of shifting, the charm dropping away and something colder settling in behind it. You are done, she repeated. After everything they have done for you. You live in their house. It is my house, I said quietly, and then I stopped. Because I was not ready. The folder in my closet was not something I was ready to open in a Sunday kitchen with the oil popping. She heard it as a figure of speech. You are unbelievable, she said. You have always been jealous of me. Everyone can see it. And she walked out with the plantains still in her hand, and I stood there having won the smallest possible battle at the cost of something I could feel shifting under my feet. The balance did not shift my way. It shifted hard toward them. Because that night my mother came to my room, and she did not raise her voice, which was worse than if she had. She sat on the edge of my bed, on the exact spot where I had sat calculating $340,000, and she told me that I had broken her heart, that my sister had cried for an hour, that she did not recognize the selfish woman I had become. And I, who had a spreadsheet proving I had given everything, sat there absorbing the accusation of selfishness, and part of me believed it. That is what 11 years does. It teaches you to plead guilty at your own trial. The second cold move happened almost by accident, and it changed the shape of everything. I was in my closet looking for the folder with the deed, because after the fight I wanted to hold the paper, to remind myself of one true thing. And behind my hanging clothes, on the shelf where my father kept things he thought no one else went, I found a different folder. My father is not a subtle man. He had labeled it in his blocky handwriting, Marisol House. I should not have opened it. It was not mine. I opened it. Inside was a handwritten agreement, not notarized, not legal, but signed by my mother and father and dated 8 months earlier. It stated their intention that upon their passing, the family house was to go to Marisol, in full, as Odalys is capable of providing for herself and Marisol is not. There was more. There were printouts. My father had been researching how to transfer a property, how to add a name to a deed, what a quitclaim was. He had made phone calls. There were numbers scrawled in the margins. My parents, who did not own the house, who had not made a payment on it in 7 years, were quietly planning to give it to my sister. They did not know it was already mine. They thought it was still theirs to give. I stood in the closet holding 2 folders, one in each hand. In my right hand, the deed with my name on it, warm and chemical smelling still in my memory. In my left, my parents planned to hand my house to the daughter they actually loved. And for the first time, the whole picture assembled itself, the way a ledger assembles when you finally find the entry that explains all the others. The plantains, the allowance, the word reliable. They were not using me because they had run out of options. They were using me because they had decided, long ago, which daughter was the person and which one was the resource. I was not being asked to fund the family. I was being farmed. That was the connection turn. The money that vanished and the future they were building were the same trail. And I was the one paying for a house they intended to give to someone else. I did not confront them that night. This is important, because the old me would have. The old me would have marched downstairs waving the folder, demanding to be seen, and they would have turned it around on me within 4 sentences, made me the villain for snooping, and I would have ended the night apologizing. I knew that script by heart, so instead I did something new. I photographed every page. I put both folders back exactly as I found them. And I went to work the next morning and I did the thing I am actually good at. I started building the real case. Between finding the folder and the appraiser on the porch, there was another clash. And I want to tell it because it shows how the takers respond the instant the supply is threatened. They do not reconsider. They double the demand. It was a Thursday. I had, for the first time in years, let the monthly allowance to Marisol lapse. Not out of strategy. Out of exhaustion. The transfer usually went out on the first of the month, automatic in my mind, if not in my bank. And I simply did not send it. On the 4th, Marisol came looking for it, and she brought reinforcements. She did not come alone. She came with my mother, and the two of them found me at the kitchen table where I was, of all things, paying the property tax on the house, on my own house. Marisol put her phone down on the table in front of me, screen up, showing the banking app, showing the balance that had not moved. It did not come through, she said. No, I said. It did not. Is there a problem with your account? My mother asked. And the thing that undid me was that she asked it with concern, real concern. But the concern was entirely for the pipe, not the well. She was worried the money was hurt. She was not, and had never been, worried that I was. There is no problem with my account, I said. I stopped the allowance. I watched them exchange a look. Mother and favored daughter. A look I had seen 1,000 times and never let myself name. It was the look of two people confirming with each other that a malfunction had occurred and would need to be corrected. Marisol sat down across from me, and she did the thing she does. She made her voice small and wounded, and she said, Odalys, I have bills. You know I cannot cover my bills without it. Are you trying to make me homeless? Is that what this is? Homeless. From a woman who had never once contributed $1 to a home, said to the woman who had paid for every home she had ever slept in. You are 31 years old, I said. You have never held a job for a full year. I have paid your rent, your car, your phone, your boutique, and your groceries for longer than some marriages last. I am not making you homeless. I am asking you to become an adult, which is a different thing, and I understand it does not feel that way to you. My mother slapped the table. Not hard, a small, sharp sound, the sound of a woman who has run out of persuasion and reached for volume. How dare you speak to your sister like that? After everything. You think because you have a little money you are better than us. You have always thought that. There it was again, the little money, the $340,000, made small, made into an attitude problem. And I realized, sitting there with the property tax bill in one hand, that no amount would ever be enough, and no gratitude would ever be given. Because to thank me would be to admit I had given, and to admit I had given would be to admit the arrangement was not the natural order of a family body, but a theft dressed as one. They could not thank me without the whole story collapsing. So they had chosen, all of them, to call it my attitude instead. Marisol stood up so fast her chair scraped back. Fine, she said. Fine, I will just tell everyone how selfish you are. See if I care. And she took her phone off the table, the phone I paid for, and she walked out. My mother followed her, but at the door she turned back to me and she said the thing that I now understand was the real beginning of the end. She said, Your father is handling this. You will see. And she left. Your father is handling this. I did not know yet what it meant, but I filed it, the way I file an unexplained entry in a ledger, a number I cannot yet source, but know I will have to. 3 days later, I found out exactly what my father was handling. When I came home to the man measuring the front of the house. The third hot confrontation came when I underestimated how fast they would move. I had assumed I had time. I did not. A week after I found the folder, I came home to find a man I did not know measuring the front of the house with a laser tool, and my father standing on the porch he claimed to hate, directing him. When I asked what was happening, my father said they were getting the house appraised. For insurance, he said. But the man had a business card that said nothing about insurance and everything about estate planning. And my father took it back from my hand a little too quickly. "Why does the house need to be appraised, Papa? Do not worry about it," he said. "This is grown people's business. I am 34 years old. I have signed contracts worth more than this man made in a decade." And my father, standing on my porch, told me not to worry my head about grown people's business. Something in me that had been bending for 11 years finally reached the end of how far it would go. I did not yell. I looked at him and I said, "Whose house do you think this is?" And he looked at me with genuine confusion, because to him the answer was so obvious it did not merit a response. And that confusion told me everything. He did not even hold the theft as a secret. He held it as an obvious truth. The house was Marisol's future. I was simply the mechanism by which it stayed standing. The balance was almost entirely theirs now. They had a plan, a timeline, an appraiser. All I had was 2 photographs on my phone and a spreadsheet no one had asked to see. Then came the failure, the real one. I need to tell you about it honestly because it is the part most stories leave out. I decided I needed a witness, someone in the family who would stand beside me and say, "Yes, Odalys paid for everything. Yes, this is wrong." And the person I chose was my Aunt Lorena, my mother's younger sister, who had always been kind to me, who had once slipped me $20 at my college graduation and whispered that she was proud of me. I believed Lorena saw me. I drove to her apartment on a Saturday and I laid it all out, the payments, the folder, the appraiser. I showed her the spreadsheet. I asked her, when the time came, to simply tell the truth about what she had seen over the years. Lorena listened to all of it. She made me tea, and then she told me gently that she could not get involved, that my mother had loaned her money the year her husband left, and that she still owed it, and that she could not afford, in any sense of the word, to take my side against her sister. "You will land on your feet," she told me, patting my hand. "You always do. Marisol needs them more. You always do. You will land on your feet." The exact language my family used to justify starving me. It had spread through the whole bloodline, like a shared story everyone had agreed to believe, because believing it was cheaper than helping me. I drove home and I sat in my car in the driveway of my own house for a long time. This was the bottom. My plan, such as it was, had depended on someone in that family choosing me, and I had just learned at 34 that no one would. Not one person. The strong carry the weak, and no one carries the strong. And if the strong ever set down the weight, the whole family agrees she was selfish to have ever gotten tired. I did not cry in the car. I sat there and I felt the specific cold of understanding that I was completely alone in this, and that whatever I did next, I would do without a single ally who shared my blood. And then, sitting in that cold, I realized I had been asking the wrong question the whole time. I had been trying to get them to see me, to admit what they had done, to feel guilty. That was the old flaw talking, the need to be acknowledged, to be told I mattered. But you cannot win an argument with people who have already decided you are a resource, not a person. Resources do not get apologies. So I stopped trying to be seen, and I started thinking like the controller I actually am. I did not need Lorena. I did not need anyone to take my side. I had something better than a witness. I had the paper. I had the trail. I had 11 years of documentation, and I had a deed with my name and only my name on it. And none of that required a single relative to be brave. That was the cold turn that came out of the bottom. I stopped fighting for their love and started counting what I owned. Over the next 3 weeks, I moved quietly. I pulled the full title history of the house and printed the county records. I organized 11 years of payments into a single clean ledger, the mortgage payments highlighted, each one traceable from my account to the lender. I gathered the property tax receipts, all in my name. I made copies of the photographs of my father's Marisol house folder. And I did one more thing, the thing that turned a defense into a reckoning. I contacted the lender and confirmed in writing the date the mortgage had been satisfied in full and the sole name on the title. I had it all placed in a plain folder, the same kind my father used, and I waited for the deadline they themselves had set. The cruise was in 9 days. The balance was due in 4. There was one more discovery in those 3 weeks, and it was the one that turned my quiet defense into something with teeth. It came from work, of all places, from the part of my life my family had never bothered to understand. A loan officer I know professionally, a woman named Aubrey who handles commercial financing and whom I had helped years ago with a vendor audit, called me about an unrelated matter. At the end of the call, casually, she said, "Oh, and tell your family congratulations on the property. Someone was in here asking what it would take to borrow against a home at your address. I told them the owner would have to apply in person, obviously." She laughed. She thought it was a happy thing, a family building something. I did not laugh. I asked her carefully who had been in. She should not have told me, and she caught herself. But she had known me a long time, and she trusted me. And she said only that it had been a younger woman and an older man, a daughter and a father. They had come to a bank to ask how to take a loan against my house, to pull cash out of the walls I had bought. And they had learned there that they could not because the name on the deed was not theirs. And they had left without giving that name. They had not told me. They had gone quietly to a bank with a plan to borrow against my home. And when the bank turned them away for lack of ownership, they had come home and said nothing and simply moved to the next plan. The appraisal, the transfer, the folder. This was not a family that had drifted into using me. This was a family actively, repeatedly, trying to convert my property into their cash, running into the wall of my ownership again and again, and never once considering that the wall might have feelings. I sat at my desk after that call, and I understood the last thing I needed to understand. They were not going to stop. There was no version of the future where they woke up grateful. There was only a series of attempts, each one a little bolder until either they succeeded or I made success impossible. Aubrey had, without knowing it, handed me the final piece. Not just that they had wronged me, but that they had gone to an institution and tried, on paper, in a place with records, to take what was mine. It was no longer my word against theirs. There was a bank that had turned them away. I thanked Aubrey, and I asked her for one small thing, a written note for my own records confirming the inquiry. No names attached, just the date and the address, and the fact that an application to borrow against the property had been declined because the applicants were not the owner. She sent it that afternoon. I put it in the plain folder with the rest. It was the page I would not need to say a word about. It would say everything on its own. They forced the timing, not me. Every choice from here was one they made. My mother announced there would be a family dinner that Sunday. A real one, with Aunt Lorena and Uncle Guillermo and Marisol's boyfriend Reed, whom my parents were eager to impress because he came from a family with money. And Marisol landing him would solve, in their minds, the problem of Marisol forever. It was to be a celebration of the cruise that they still assumed I was paying for. I understood then that the dinner was the peak, and that they had built it for me without knowing it. All the witnesses I could have wanted, gathered in one room by my mother's own hand. The Sunday came. The house smelled of everything my mother made when she wanted to perform love in front of company. The plantains and the browned garlic and a cake she only baked for people she was trying to impress. The table was crowded. Reed sat beside Marisol looking politely uncomfortable, in the way of a man who is starting to notice things about the family he is marrying into. Lorena would not meet my eyes. Guillermo talked about the weather, and halfway through the meal, my mother did the thing that gave this story its title. She set down her fork. She looked at me. And in front of Reed, in front of everyone, she said, "Odalys, your sister deserves to enjoy her life. You work. That is what you are good for. If you do not like the arrangement, you can leave." Reed's fork paused in the air. Marisol smiled down at her plate. My father nodded. I had waited 11 years for permission to leave. She had just given it to me at a dinner table in front of witnesses. I almost laughed at the gift of it. I did not raise my voice. This is the part I am most proud of, that I did not become loud. Because loud was what they expected, and loud was what they knew how to dismiss. Instead, I reached down to the floor beside my chair, where I had set the plain folder before dinner, and I placed it on the table next to my untouched plate. I have a habit, when I am about to present findings, of straightening the edge of a stack of papers so it lines up perfectly square with the table edge. I did that now. Squared the folder. It is a small thing I do at work before I tell someone something they do not want to hear. My mother watched me do it and did not understand it, but Reed did, I think. Reed sat up a little. Before I leave, I said, I want to make sure everyone at this table understands exactly what they are asking me to leave. The kitchen behind me had gone quiet except for the last of the oil settling in the pan, a soft ticking as it cooled. I opened the folder. I took out the first page. I did not slide it across the table dramatically. I simply set it down where my mother could see it, and I let her look, and I waited. The county title record, my name, sole owner. This house, I said, has been mine, only mine, for 7 years. Not a promise, not a plan, the deed. I paid it off. The mortgage you have been living inside of, rent-free, since before Marisol's boutique, was paid by me, in full, 7 years ago. My mother's mouth opened. She reached for the paper and then stopped, her hand hovering because touching it would make it real. She has a way, my mother, when she is caught, of pressing her lips together and turning her head slightly to the side, as if the truth is a smell she can avoid by not facing it directly. She did that now. Turned her face away from her own name's absence on the deed. I set down the second page. The lender's written confirmation, date paid, name on title. A separation, a breath, the oil ticking. Papa, I said, turning to him. You had the house appraised 3 weeks ago. I know why. I set down the third page. The photograph of his folder, Marisol House, in his own handwriting. My father is a man who has never once in my life admitted he was wrong. When cornered, he does not fold, he attacks. And I watched him gather himself to do it now. Watched him reach for the old script, snooping, disrespect, grown people's business. But the photograph was his own handwriting, and Reed was watching. And the attack died somewhere between his chest and his mouth. What he did instead was worse for him. He looked at the appraiser's card still sitting on the sideboard, the one he had taken from my hand, and he understood in real time, in front of everyone, that he had spent 8 months planning to transfer a house he did not own, that every phone call, every scrawled number in that margin, had been a man planning to give away something that was never his. The plan was not just cruel. It was a plan built on a thing that did not exist. His face went slack in a way I had never seen. The particular stillness of a proud man doing math and hating the answer. Marisol broke the silence. This is not fair, she said. And her voice was the exact voice of the girl who used to press her cold feet against my legs during storms, high and frightened. And for 1 second the old need in me stirred, the need to comfort her, to make the thunder into furniture. Where am I supposed to live? Not, is this true? Not, did you really pay for everything? Where am I supposed to live? Even now, cornered, she could only think of what she was owed. And that question, more than the folder, more than the deed, was what finally cut the last thread in me. Because it proved that there was nothing underneath the money. I had feared for 11 years that if I stopped paying, the love would stop. And now I had my answer, laid out on the table in my sister's own words. There had never been any love to stop. There had only ever been the arrangement. I set down the fourth page, the note from the bank. A separation, the oil ticking, my own steady hand smoothing the paper flat. 3 weeks ago, where I said, the two of you went to a bank and asked to borrow money against this house, my house. They turned you away because your names are not on the deed. You did not tell me. You came home and had the house appraised instead. I looked at my father when I said it, and then at Marisol. You went to strangers to try to take my home before you would ever have simply asked me for help as a person. That is the difference between us. I would have said yes to a person. You only ever spoke to me as a wall to get around. Marisol's face did the thing my mother's does, the turning away, and I saw for the first time how much of my mother lived inside my sister. The same instinct to avoid a truth by refusing to look at it. I set down the last page, the ledger. 11 years, one clean column, $340,000 highlighted at the bottom. I am not telling you this to be paid back, I said. I know I will never see this money. I am telling you so that when I leave, which Mama has kindly given me permission to do, everyone at this table knows the exact shape of what you are losing. You are not losing a selfish daughter. You are losing the woman who has quietly kept the roof over your heads for 11 years, while you decided in writing that she was worth less than her sister. Reed stood up. He set his napkin on his plate, and he said to Marisol in a low, even voice, "I think I should go." And the way he said it, everyone understood he did not just mean tonight. Marisol turned to him, and the charm came up like a reflex. The smile, the reach for his arm, but he stepped back from it. And I watched her realize that the thing she had brought home to impress the family had just watched the family reveal exactly what it was. He nodded at me on his way out. Just once. Then the front door closed. Aunt Lorena was crying. Not for me, I understood that. She was crying because she had been given a chance to stand beside me and had chosen not to. And now she had to watch the reckoning from the coward's seat, which is its own small punishment. She said my name once, Odalys, reaching, and I let it fall into the space between us without answering. Not every question gets an answer. She had made her choice in her kitchen over tea. This was simply the sound it made landing. I stood, I picked up my folder, squared it once against the table out of habit, and I looked at the three of them. My mother turned away, my father doing the terrible math, my sister asking the heir where she would live. "The house is mine," I said. "You have until the end of the month. That is more time than the cruise you thought I was buying. Consider it the last thing I pay for." And I walked out of the dining room I had furnished, in the house I had bought, past the kitchen where the last plantains sat cooling in the pan, the good ones already eaten, and up the stairs one final time to pack. Here is what happened after, because a reckoning is only the middle of the story, never the end. I did not throw my parents into the street. I want you to know that because I know what you are wondering. I am not the person they made me out to be, and proving that to myself mattered more than proving anything to them. I gave them 60 days, not 30, once the anger cooled enough for me to be practical. I paid the first and last month on a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town. One time, a clean break, and I had my lawyer send a letter making clear it was the final dollar. My father did not speak to me during the move. My mother spoke only to tell me the apartment was beneath them, which told me she had learned nothing, and I felt the last thread of guilt let go, because you cannot rescue someone who is insulting the lifeboat. The house I kept. I had the locks changed on a Tuesday, the same day of the week the wound had opened. Though I did not plan it that way, I only noticed it after. The locksmith was a cheerful man who had no idea he was closing 11 years of an open door. I stood in the empty dining room that evening with the new key in my hand, and the house was very quiet. And for the first time, the quiet did not frighten me. It was not the lonely quiet of my old apartment. It was the quiet of a thing that is finally fully mine. Marisol texted me a month later. Not an apology, I did not expect one, and I did not get one. The story is honest about that. She texted to ask if I could co-sign a lease. I did not answer. Reed, I learned from a mutual acquaintance, had ended things the week of the dinner. The family with money had looked at the family without it, and made the appraisal my father never got to finish. My mother's blood pressure, I heard through Guillermo, who is the one relative who still calls me, is managed now by the county clinic, and she complains about the wait times. My father took a part-time job at a hardware store, back and all, because the allowance he had counted on for the rest of his life had a name on it after all, and the name was mine, and I had stopped signing. The theory of the family as a body sending blood to the weak had a flaw he never accounted for. The heart was allowed to leave. The story of the dinner did not stay at the dinner. Reed told his own family why he had walked away. And word moves through a town the way water moves through a floor, finding every low place. My mother had spent years telling the extended family a particular story about her daughters, the reliable one and the delicate one, the giver and the girl who needed protecting. That story did not survive contact with a deed. At the next family gathering I did not attend, Guillermo told me. The aunts and cousins who had nodded along for years about poor struggling Marisol and good dependable Odalys were quieter than usual. because the arithmetic had reached them, and $340,000 is a number that rearranges a room's sympathies. My mother, who had built her whole social standing on being the matriarch of a devoted family, found that the devotion had been mine all along, purchased monthly, and that when I stopped buying it, no one else stepped in to pay. Marisol, without the allowance and without Reed, did the thing she had avoided for a decade. She got a job. Guillermo says she works at a call center now and complains about it constantly, but she has held it, at last count, longer than the boutique lasted. I do not know whether to feel vindicated or sad about that. Mostly, I feel nothing, which is its own kind of healing, the day you realize a person no longer has the power to move you. Aunt Lorena sent a card at the holidays. I have not opened it. Maybe I will. Not every thread gets tied. And me, I still keep the books for the flooring company. I still see the whole story in a spreadsheet. But I do a new thing now on Sundays. I fry plantains in my own kitchen, in a pan I bought myself, and I eat the first one, standing at the stove, the good one, hot and sweet and mine, before I do anything else. It is such a small thing. It took me 34 years to learn that I was allowed to take the first one, that being needed and being loved are not the same, and that I had spent $340,000 and 11 years learning to tell them apart. I do not have my family anymore, not really, but I have the house and the quiet and the first plantain, and a name on a deed that is only mine. I think that is more than an apology. I think that is a life. If you have ever been the one who holds a whole family together with your own money and your own silence, only to be told you were selfish the moment you got tired, then Odalys was telling your story too. But here is the harder question. What are you still paying for right now, today, that you are afraid to stop paying, because deep down you are not sure they would still call if the money did? Tell me in the comments about the moment you finally counted the cost. If this story reached something real in you, subscribe and stay for the next one. Like and share it with someone who needs to hear that being needed was never the same as being loved.